Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Worth Listening podcast. I'm your girl, Lauryn Williams, a certified financial planner. And I am back with my girl, Chloe Moore, who's also a certified financial planner. And if you've never listened to us before, we do a series called Know Better, Do Better, where we help you understand all pieces of the money puzzle from the financial planner's point of view. On this podcast, we also have people come on and tell their money story. And just last week, we had Lauryn Williams come on and share about how she ended up fleeing the country. And I thought, hey, we got the real life perspective of that. I'm also a person who's fled the country, but we need to put some financial planning pieces of the puzzle into your mind before you think about jumping ship, because in this time of uncertainty, so many people are thinking about what else can I do? How can I get out of here? We are tired of America. We need something different. And I feel you, because like I said, I fled the country, but I also want you to be prepared. I want you to think through it before you just pick up and leave. And so today we are talking all things preparing to leave the country. But if you've never been to this show before, we also always start with trends, taxes, and tea. And we keep you updated on the latest trends on how to save more, pay less. You know, we share a little bit of tea sometimes, or, like some current events. So we're going to keep it local before we leave the country. We got to talk about also moving cross country. Chloe, what do you got for us for trends, taxes, and tea today?
Yeah, so actually during COVID, a lot of people, fled the country too, just because we had remote work and people were leaving to move to different parts of the country that were maybe a little lower cost of living. And some people actually left the country altogether. And we're starting to see this trend again. And something that's been popping up recently is all of these stories about the downsides of being a digital nomad and the downsides of remote work. And kind of this lifestyle and how it can fail in some cases, or it can go wrong. So, a lot of times people, including my clients, think that maybe having this digital nomad lifestyle is glamorous and, fun. And it does come with challenges. Thinking about successfully merging like your work and travel, it does require a plan, which we'll talk about today. But you also have to have a routine. You have to have discipline. You have to think about, are you in different time zones? Do you work for yourself or do you work for a company? What are your requirements there as far as, fulfilling your work requirements? In a time where people are getting laid off, there's a lot of excess cutting of employees across the board. Are you at more risk? So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider, and it might not be the right solution for everyone.
Yeah, you are so right about this. I've seen some people just pick up and move cross country from, some of these higher cost of living cities, the Californians and New Yorks of the world, looking for something like a better cost of living. And you can achieve that. But if you didn't do your homework, you might also be getting an adjustment on your income related to that cost of living. Your job is like, oh, well, you don't live in this state now. You live over here. So we're going to adjust your salary down. And people have been shocked and amazed to see that information come through because they didn't look into it. The other thing, too, is sometimes you up and leave your community, your family, and you find out that it's a lot harder to make friends at an older age. And so now you're in a place where you thought you're going to have a better quality of life, but you're missing community, you're missing connection. And so you're unhappy in that new place, even though you picked up and left. And then don't get me started on internet issues, even just in America. Like I said, if you're just doing something locally and you're deciding I'm moving from this side of the country to that. I was living a digital nomad life before I, like I said, fled the country. And sometimes you would, scramble to find a co-working office, or you'd be in a Starbucks or something like that because you didn't plan accordingly. And then you had an important meeting and the internet was undependable in Starbucks because it was free. Or, you couldn't get your VPN to cut on and you're like, ooh, I can't, access clients' financial information on this open network sort of thing. And so there's a lot that you need to think through before you just kind of pick up and move, whether it's cross country or out of the country.
Yeah, and I even had recently, because I work with tech employees that have equity compensation. I have a client that lives in Texas, and she was wondering why last year did she have to file a California tax return because she moved from California to Texas, and that's something people think that they can escape the California taxes. If you earn those RSUs or those stock options in California, moving does not absolve you from paying those taxes to the state of California. So just something else to think about as well.
Yeah, so we'll link to a couple of articles about moving cross country, living that lifestyle, that digital nomad life. And they said it's not that it's not all it's cracked up to be. I don't regret a moment of it, but it's also not for everybody. And so while you're looking at Instagram posts thinking like, "Ooh, I want so and so's life," you might not see the the not so cool things that so and so is going through. They're only posting the good stuff, not the "Ooh, I had this issue" problem. But today we're going to be talking, like I said, not just moving cross country, but fleeing the country. So as you think about this idea of like preparing to leave the country, Chloe, have you ever thought about leaving the country?
Not to live, like maybe for an extended period of time, like a few weeks or a month or something. But yeah.
I'm working on her, y'all. I'm working on her.
Well, no, I hear some of your stories and I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
It's true. It is not for the faint of heart. Like I was just saying, like you said, it does not come without drama and excitement. But yeah, I feel like it's made my life. You're like, I'm writing these chapters. It's a book that people want to keep reading because of the drama. Some people just prefer a little less drama free, which is fine, which is why we're having this podcast today to talk about like, hey, know before you go, if you will. So what's the first thing we need to be thinking about as you pick up and you think about leaving the country?
Yeah, the first thing is just understanding what type of visa you need. There's a whole process to that. Different countries have different requirements or limits to how long you can stay there. So that's something that you really need to think about. And also, just your address and like moving somewhere, with the logistics of finding a place to live. And so, yeah, and I know you can talk a lot about that process just from your experience.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is like you think about the visa, like we in America are so privileged. We don't realize we can travel to 186 countries with our passport. There's only 196, y'all. So there's very few places that we can't go by just like booking a flight. Like if you want to come to Colombia today, you just like book a flight and you bring your passport, you go to the airport. It's not like that for most of the world. I think I was looking up Trinidad the other day and it was like 27 or something like that. Like I said, I live in Colombia now. I think it was said 72. Don't quote me on exactly the numbers, but a lot less places will accept you just by picking up and going. And so don't assume that you can just pick up and go. So even you having the passport and being allowed to enter that country comes with some parameters. So, of course, we're going to do a lot of talking about Colombia today because that's where I am. But these are examples. You need to know for whatever country you want to go to, what visa is relevant. For Colombia, you can come for 90 days and then you can extend for another 90 days. So yet you can just book a flight and show up today, but only for 90 days. So you can't be like, I moved, I don't live here anymore. And then in 89 days, you didn't do anything about your visa. And now you're going to have problems with immigration. And so then there's other visas. There's the digital nomad visa that will allow you to stay. I think they've actually changed it now to 6 months and then you can renew. They started at 2 years and then it was renewable after the 2 years. But those are things that are also changing, post COVID as the world opens back up and people try to decide like, what's best for their country and the economy in their country. You need to understand the visa processes. Some visas don't count toward residency. So like right now, I'm on a digital nomad visa in Colombia. I'm not earning any credit toward residency. So I'm not a Colombian resident. I don't have any like specific rights. They can, if I do something bad, not renew my visa. And so you also need to be careful thinking about that, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But we have friends that bought real estate in Colombia and they're on a digital nomad visa. So at any point they could be like visa denied. And now you own a whole property here and have no rights to like stay in the country and live in that property. So really understanding the visa process is very important.
Yeah, another thing to think about is just banking and investments. That can completely change once you're out of the country. So just thinking about your bank accounts and money transfers, there's certain banks that are kind of like international banks and you can have an account, easily in the US and in another country. But, just think about like as you're earning money, if you're earning money in the US, if you have to transfer that to the other country, what are those exchange rates? If you're earning money and you get relocated to another country and you want to transfer money back to the US to save or to invest, what are those rates going to be?
Ooh, that is a good one, Chloe. Yeah. When I just think about the banking, like that was definitely something that I had to learn a little bit more about because as you decide to live a life in a place versus just like visiting for a weekend, those fees add up. So I have accounts at Bank of America and they don't give you nothing for traveling. Like they're like, we are Bank of America. We don't care about you leaving this country. And if you leave this country, we gonna charge you for everything. Whereas Charles Schwab, on the other hand, is the best bank that I found so far. They'll refund you any banking fee. So if you have to go to a ATM in any part that's not, a Charles Schwab bank or any part of the world, actually, at the end of the month, they refund you all the fees related to the going to like an ATM. And the ATM fees here in Colombia are like $10. So if I went to my Bank of America, look, they take $10 in Colombia. Bank of America takes $5. I'm out of $15 every time I go. So you need to be thinking about like, let me take as much money out of this ATM this one time because it's going to cost me $15, whether I take out 5 or 500. And like I said, those fees add up quickly if you're operating in a country where there's a lot of cash being used. So clearly I don't use my Bank of America card to take money out is what you guys are learning. But also, like you said, then there's also the exchange rate. What is this money being transferred to? And banks are going to get theirs. That's how they're doing so well. That's why credit card companies exist. That's why, like fees, these little transactions like PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, everybody is like pilfering a little bit off of you. And that's where those billionaires are living their best life is off of our fees and exchange rates and things like that. So I use an app called Remitly that helps me be able to change the money over kind of for the best rate. There's a few other apps, so you can kind of go in and look at them and see like what's the rate, what am I going to get, what am I going to get charged. If you do less than a certain amount, they might charge you like a flat $3 or $4. Once you do more than a certain amount, then they're going to say, okay, there's no fee, but they're still collecting their money on the exchange rate. You're not getting dollar for dollar, whatever that rate is on the day of. And that's something else that you need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and with credit cards too, you mentioned, fees. There's definitely foreign transaction fees for some credit cards. So even if you're not considering moving, if you travel a lot internationally, make sure that you get a credit card that does not charge foreign transaction fees. That's another 3% on every purchase that you make.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've also been got there as well. I ditched my non-travelers credit cards quite a while back when I started to get real heavy on it. But initially, it was just like, oh, it's a card. You swipe it and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, where does extra stuff come from? There are definitely still credit cards that have foreign transaction fees. And even to that point, transferring money back and forth via the accounts, US dollars versus Colombian dollars. So in Colombia, we have Bank Colombia is kind of like the bigger, more well-known bank. And they operate like you want to go to a store, you can actually like kind of use your bank account and transfer, kind of like how we Venmo or Zelle or kind of Cash App money, but it's through the bank specifically. So then you want to transfer money into the bank so that you actually have cash to be able to use, because sometimes a lot of places won't take credit cards. So if you don't have cash, you can use this banking app, but that requires you to open a bank account, which requires you to have a Visa. So it's like everything is connected. And then if there's more than a certain amount coming into that account over the course of the year, I need to file a Colombian tax return. So here's yet another thing. Like as a digital nomad, I'm not required to file taxes. But regardless of who I am, now that I open this bank account and I have a certain amount coming in or out over the course of the year, I need to file a tax return. So here's yet another thing I have to do that you need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And the other thing is investment accounts. So some custodians and even banks may require you to have a U.S. address. If you change your address to a foreign address because you move out of the country, they can freeze your accounts. Investment firms will liquidate everything. So you pay capital gains taxes on any gains from anything that they're selling. They could liquidate everything, send it to you. I mean, you pay income taxes. So just be careful about whether or not you can add a foreign address or if you need to keep a U.S. home address here so you don't have any complications or unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. And the other thing too is that as electronic as this world is getting, the smarter it is getting electronically. So sometimes your VPN doesn't even work. So you're like, oh, let me just pretend like I'm in US to log into my XYZ bank account, and you can't even do that. which they're like, hey, this is, we see this is sketchy, or we realize you're out of the country. So now you can't make your transactions in addition to like Chloe was saying, like, where do you live? That's probably been one of the hardest things for me. I'm using my mama's address right now, but if you technically live nowhere and I have the right to live nowhere, then like I don't understand. Like I can't use a PO box for a investment account. But what if you don't have a friend or a family member who's willing to let you use their address? Like, yeah, that could be problematic.
Yeah. And then also understanding what you can invest in. I had a couple of clients that moved out of the country several years ago. And there's different tax implications. If they invest in U.S. mutual funds, they have to pay certain taxes on those investments in that other country. So we only can invest in ETFs or individual stocks. So just, understanding that is important too. Or if you have a retirement account, those retirement accounts might be investing in certain foreign funds. And, will the US have any issues with that? So even with retirement accounts too, there's different types of retirement plans. All the other countries don't have 401ks, but they have some sort of retirement system that you pay into if you're getting paid in that currency. They have their own version of Social Security or a pension. And so I have clients that have racked up pensions in 2 or 3 countries, and they're like, I don't even know how much is in these accounts or when I'll be able to get it or how it's going to be taxed. But that's the result of working in different countries and getting paid in those currencies.
Yeah, which, like I said, once again leads to kind of the same point, like circling back to like the very beginning is, how long do you want to be away? Is this a permanent move? Is this something that you're just trying out? You probably wouldn't just say like, okay, I'm sick of America, I'm going to Colombia, and, pack up all your stuff and go and not think, about what if I never come back, and learn everything on the fly. You want to learn something before you leave, but you also want to have like a better idea of like, what do I need to do before I leave if I want to make this a longer stay? Because sometimes, like you said, you're like, oh, I'm going to go on vacation, or I'm going to go on a little sabbatical, or I'm going to, fill in the blank. But it might just be like, I'm going indefinitely. Like, I don't have plans to really return back to America to live. You never say never. Like, life happens for everybody, but knowing before you start to just like rack up all these different accounts and open all these different things and just like make this kind of financial mess along the way, really understanding like, oh, let me just stay on the tourist visa that's allowed because I don't want to have a life here. Let me just figure out what kind of life there is here before I commit to moving here is another piece of the puzzle. Like making those rash decisions and just pick up and go can be very expensive because you don't understand the underlying cost.
Yeah. Another big one is taxes. So one of the big things is, like Lauren said, she had to open up bank accounts and things in Colombia. So if you have any bank or investment accounts or any kind of assets in another country, you do have to report that to the US, or you will have some stiff penalties there. That's something that people often forget about is, if they are moving somewhere and start to accumulate assets, when they're filing their tax return in the US, they have to report, any overseas accounts. The other thing is the US will always want their taxes. So it does not matter where you live. You cannot flee from paying US income taxes. So there are some tax treaties or some countries that have tax treaties that can eliminate, double taxation where you're paying taxes in that country and the US. But, either way, you need to make sure that you understand the income tax implications and that you might potentially have to file 2 separate tax returns in 2 countries.
100%. And even to that point, sometimes people are always looking for that tax out. That's definitely the thing. Like you said, we always see on Instagram and social media with some of these like financial influencers, like, I'm gonna teach you how to not pay taxes or never. There are some cool things that you can do. Like there's the foreign tax credit that you can take. And then there's the foreign earned income exclusion that is also a possibility, but they come with criteria. So don't just leave the country like, oh, I'm gonna pay less taxes, or my friend is paying less taxes, so I'm gonna just do what they're doing. It is very specific based on your situation. You need to understand exactly how those credits and those exclusions work and whether or not they're applicable to you. I was feeling good about one, and I actually ended up not meeting the criteria because I traveled back to America too much last year. So you can bet your butt I'm counting the days that I come to America this year so that I don't miss that opportunity from a tax standpoint. But also you need to be like financially organized to know, like, is this even relevant to me? Do I even need these exclusions from a tax standpoint? Because maybe they're not something that you need to worry about.
Yeah. The other thing to think about is healthcare. A lot of health insurance plans cover you in the US, but even if you're traveling, you're not necessarily covered with your health insurance plan. So, just think about what type of insurance you need if you're living outside of the country, because we do need health insurance. It is very expensive in some cases, especially in a catastrophic event. So you could get, a national healthcare plan or private insurance that caters to expats. But there's different options there as well.
Yeah. And so this was like a rude awakening for me. Like when you're young, you're dumb, we feel invincible. You're not worried about it. You try to book the cheapest trip you can, go where you want to go, do what you want to do, spend your money on what you want to spend it on. And health insurance is not one of the things you're thinking about when you go on vacation to Cancun or Puerto Rico or whatever, fill in the blank kind of place. But 99% of the American plans are not going to cover you when you leave the country. And so you need to be looking at your credit cards if you're just going even on a regular vacation to see, like, is there some sort of traveler's insurance built in? There's usually that box you can check when you go to buy an airline ticket or things like that. Like sometimes those cover health things. Sometimes they just cover like, if there's a tornado or whatever, you can get your money back. But reading the fine print on the types of insurance that exist is important. And then, like you said, when you're going on a trip for even just like the 2 or 3 months, like if you're just going to use like a tourist visa, then I recommend something like travel insurance. And it's pretty cheap. You like, when are you leaving? When are you coming back? What places are you going to? And they just cover you because you might be in a third world country where you don't, you get in some sort of accident and you're like, I don't want to be treated here. Take me back to America where I know they're going to stitch me up right. And so they'll cover like the cost to fly you back. They'll cover the cost to fly your body back should, that happen because, it's sad for people sometimes. Something really terrible happens and now they got to figure out how to get their child out of a foreign country. That's what travel insurance does, is help you be able to be treated in that foreign country or even get back to your country. There's also digital nomad insurance. Digital nomad insurance is like, I'm traveling all over the place. I'm working from my computer. It's a newer insurance. So I was paying $70 a month for my digital nomad insurance and was covered, worldwide to be able to travel. And it literally like puts in big letters, like, except for the United States. So you're not covered in the United States. And I don't know if that's specifically because I'm American. They're like, no, you need to get American insurance. Or if America is just like, we just work differently and our healthcare is much more expensive. But, you need to understand the rules related to those like healthcares. And then you might also be eligible for like local healthcare. So here in Colombia, I've, joined the local healthcare system. I pay like $100 a month for full coverage for everything. There's private insurance. Then there's like, just like basic, economy insurance where you can go to, you get in the system and you kind of work your way through the system. Kind of like the difference between PPO and HMO in America, but knowing, can I do it as a foreigner? And then how much does it cost me and what does it cover is an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And something else to think about too is just there's other types of insurance to consider. So your property and casualty insurance. So thinking about renter's insurance, like if something happens, if there's a fire or flood, are your personal belongings protected? Liability to other people if you get in a car accident. If you have very valuable belongings like jewelry, artwork, or other things that you're collecting as you're living in this other country, are those things protected? And so each country has different ways that they insure those items.
Yeah, this is a good one. Chloe actually always, she keeps me honest. I don't have any like property or casualty. I mean, I have car insurance because I have a car here. But I was thinking about it the other day, like what happens if like my apartment unit burns down or it's like a townhouse that I live in, but it's connected to other people. So I'm like, somebody fall asleep smoking or burn up some food or whatever, I could be affected without like having actually done anything. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what if I lost all my stuff? So yeah, now I'm looking into how to get insured for my property here in Colombia.
Yeah.
Because that would be bad. It would be terrible. Like you said, it's something easy in America. It's like $12 a month or something to, have your stuff covered. Chloe, actually, you had a problem and had to use your renter's insurance at one point. So yeah, you don't want to get caught slipping in that area.
Yeah. And then another thing that people often forget about is estate planning. So, just thinking about all the state documents you need, will, power of attorney, healthcare directives. So some states and countries recognize what a uniform international will. So the will that you create in the U.S. would, work in other countries or other areas. But if your state does not, or your country that you're moving to does not recognize that will, you may need separate wills for each country to cover the assets that you own in each country. And something else people don't think about either is just if you're expected to receive an inheritance or gifts, from parents or aunts and uncles or anything like that, or grandparents while living abroad, there could be some tax implications there from receiving those assets.
100%. So I can say I checked the estate planning box. I am actually following up with someone locally because when I was talking to my American estate planning attorney, she did say, well, do you have any assets there? And I was like, no, everything's in my American. And I was like, well, I do have this one bank account and I have a car. And she was like, that's an asset, girl. And plus all my stuff is here. So what do I do with my personal belongings that are here in the event of death? So I'm actually in the process of finding like a local estate planning attorney as well to kind of have some additional documents put in place.
Yeah. Something else to think about too is just like the whole logistics of moving. I know you have some funny stories, Lauren, about finding a place to live or moving and changing your lease to another place. But yeah, as you start to purchase assets and really just complete everyday tasks, there could definitely be some complications there, things that are different from the way we do it in the U.S.
And financial implications, not even just like it's so real in the moving street. So first, I'll just start by saying what a lot of Americans do when we leave the country is we'll just Airbnb something. We'll do a long-term Airbnb, try to get your bearings, learn a little bit about the country, and then you kind of move on to something different. If you stay in Airbnb, you're going to be paying a premium. One reason that is problematic is that we need to be thinking about like merging into the culture and how us being in Airbnbs in general, like one, it's like tourism for a lot of places, but where people are opening up Airbnbs, how they're buying them for investment properties and things like that does kind of contribute to gentrification. And so you need to be thinking about like, if I stay in this place long term, if I'm paying a premium, what does it do to the local economy and how am I affecting the things around me? Because, I call it like, people are like, oh, a colonizer, these colonizers, there's this term out there that people are using all the time, but you might actually be contributing to colonization unknowingly by being in a country and, throwing your dollars around in a way that is unproductive to the economy there, paying a little bit extra for this, tipping people for that, etc. So just be mindful. I know we're talking about furnished versus unfurnished or just like where to live in general, but like where to live is like, how do you immerse yourself in this place if you really want to live there versus being an American who's taking advantage of the benefits of being in a different country? How about like you give something to that country and you make sure that you're a good participant of being in that place? And so, as I was mentioning, Airbnb is a place that a lot of people stay, but you can also go off the beaten path and do like a private rental situation, either directly with the owner or with an agency. I'll tell you, with an agency, you generally have to jump through a lot more hoops in order to be able to rent. So I had to have a co-signer. And I'm just like, but I'm not broke. Like, I got good credit. That doesn't matter. You don't have no credit in Colombia, girl. And that was like a costly thing. I actually basically paid somebody to co-sign so that I could go through a rental company and get my property. But I have a lot more rights when I go through the rental company. So to Chloe's point, I did have a problem. I thought I was going to have to move out immediately. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is catching me off guard. What am I going to do? Now I got to find a new place. And then I have a real contract. They were like, no, you don't have to move. Like that was a mistake on the part of the owner, etc. But if you go directly to the owner, it's your word against theirs if something happens. If you're an Airbnb, you're taking that up with Airbnb. So you have some protections, but once again, you're paying a premium. So in Airbnb, I was paying like $1,000 a month for like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom that was super duper small. Now I'm paying the same $1,000 a month for 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, and much more space. I'm in a gated community. There's a park, there's a soccer field, there's like a little community center. Like I'm getting so much more for my money. So it's like, oh yeah, this is cheap compared to America. But what am I doing? Like I said, to the local economy by staying in this place and paying this premium because a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom don't cost $1,000 in Colombia, period. So yeah, be mindful of that. And then to the point of furnished versus unfurnished, you want to be thinking about like, okay, Airbnb is going to come furnished. I don't have to think about it. But if I'm going to stay here for a long time, then maybe I do want to build a life. I want to get the furniture. But it's also, you get into a place, you buy all this furniture, and then you decide you need to go back to America. What are you going to do with all these things? So that is like a teeter-totter of, and like I said, you can also do a furnished apartment through a contract or, something that's other than Airbnb that's more local. But you definitely need to be thinking about like, do I want to sit on other people's couch? Or do I want to buy my own couch and like this bed or that bed and whatever? You don't know if you're going to stay in this place or not, which we don't know in America either. But yeah, if you're completely unsure, then definitely do something short term. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox about moving. Sorry.
Yeah, and then another thing I'll bring up too is just the process of buying a home could be different. So, some people think too, oh, I want to buy a house in another country. It'll be so much cheaper. But, every place has their own different rules and their own process for buying a home, how much of a down payment you have to put down, how the mortgage process works. I was talking to a client who lives in another country and was looking at buying a home, and they needed way more than 20%. Which, in the US, you could buy a home for little or nothing down, which is not necessarily the greatest thing. But, it's just the mortgage process works a little bit different there. And even property taxes, work different in other countries. So it's not always as easy or as cheap as you think it could be.
Girl, this is a good one because there's so many people in these group chats that are just like, oh, but it's so cheap over there. I'm going to buy me a property. And so you hear people kind of like flossing, like, oh, I just bought a property over here. I can't figure out how to get my utilities set up. And it's like that. And they're like, I'm not even in the country. So they join the group chat just to like get information from people, like how to do it. But they don't have any familiarity with the country. So I'm like, you bought a whole property and you don't live here? That could be a mess. And I know particularly in Colombia, it's a cash buy. Like you're not buying a property for, like you said, 20% down or whatever. There's no financing in America that's going to let you finance a property over here. And if you find something that will finance you over here, it's going to cost you a grip. We talking, like 20%, like credit card interest rates in order for you to be able to take on a loan, which is just like, not practical on, something you're paying $100,000, $200,000 on. So generally, if you're a foreigner, you have to buy in cash in Colombia specifically. So you want to be mindful of that as well. Yeah, it could be crazy. People do all kinds of crazy things. And the other thing, too, to go back to the visa piece of the puzzle, they could ask you to leave. Like I said, I have a friend who bought a property here and is currently on a tourist visa. Like, could not get her digital nomad visa renewed, which, like I said, doesn't give you any rights toward residency. She was ineligible for the investment visa initially because she had to, like, leave the country and come back before buying the property. And, like, that didn't work because she has kids in school and whatever. It gets complicated real quick, but at any point they can tell her she needs to leave Colombia, and she got a whole house she paid for that she just can't live in and can't do nothing about.
Yeah, that actually, since you brought that up, that made me think of something else. I know, we're both over here, single and at least childless for the moment. But yeah, I mean, if you do have, children and you're moving a spouse and kids and putting them in schools, that could be a huge consideration because a lot of people do, when you think of digital nomads, a lot of times you think of someone who's single with no kids, but people move their families out of the country too. So that's a whole nother consideration, looking at schools and just removing your kids from, their family, their friends, their environment that they're accustomed to, speaking another language. So a lot of that could change your whole family situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, like the psychological, the emotional effects of that, I think as well is something else to consider. But even before that, like you said, leaving the country, the other thing I've seen a lot of is everybody like packs all their stuff up into a storage unit. And that's something I even saw with my clients in America. Like they're like, oh, well, I'm moving from here to here, or I'm moving with my boyfriend or whatever. And everybody loves a storage unit. But what I have learned about storage unit is that like 80% of the time, you don't want what's in your storage unit. So you done paid on it for a year or two, spent all this money, couple $1,000s, and you probably had a couple $1,000s worth of stuff in it. And now you're finally ready to move out and it got cobwebs on it. It's funky. It smells like a storage unit and you don't want to sit on it again. It doesn't work in your new place. So same things when leaving the country, like you might need a storage unit. Like right now, my storage unit has like personal items in it, newspaper articles and things like that I haven't been able to bring here. And I'm like, I'm not just going to throw this away. But I definitely learned a lesson. I have a much smaller storage unit this time around because I didn't pack up my whole house and put it in storage. I got rid of all my like furniture and stuff like that and only have personal items. So be thinking about what you're going to put in storage and how long you're going to keep that for, because that's an additional expense.
The last thing is just thinking about the psychological effects or other considerations that we haven't talked about. It's just a big change in your daily routine. If you're moving to a different country, especially in a country that doesn't speak your native language. So, having to learn another language and learning about different customs, fitting in as an outsider, especially, when you're in the minority, that could be an issue. And, just building community, finding friends, all of those things are going to be difficult.
100%. And it can be wonderful. Like I said, I am so happy here. I have found my people pretty easily. There's WhatsApp groups, there's meetup groups. There's all kinds of different ways to get out and meet new people. And I think because it's a smaller, group of expats, you already have something in common with them. So it might be easier for you to find people to like be in community with. But it is work and it is starting over. So, sometimes people are leaving the country because they want to hit the reset button. But sometimes they're just like, oh, I think this would be cool. I think this would be, like I said, cost of living. Like there's various reasons. And if those don't match up, you could get here and you could be like shocked by like, oh my goodness, like the sun goes down at 6 o'clock every day. It's not just like November time when, in America where it's cold and it goes down a little bit earlier. I didn't realize I was so close to the equator, or it's so hot, or, fill in the blank with XYZ thing that's not normal or not a part of what was your normal. And it could become a real stressor in your life and something that kind of throws you off from feeling comfortable in the new place that you choose.
Yeah. And it can also change the relationships that you have with friends and family. There's the cost of flying home to visit, friends and family, or if you want to maintain relationships with those people in the US, they might not be able to afford to come to see you very often. You could have aging parents or grandparents and family members that it's important to spend time with those people, while they're still here. And that could be difficult for you to come see them on a regular basis, or they might not be in a position physically to come see you.
Yeah. The cost of picking up and going in the emergency, flying from one side of America to the other can be pretty expensive. But yeah, trying to get from another country home in a quick time, like Buenos Aires is another place that I really loved in Argentina. But it's a 12-hour flight to Miami, like 12 hour, and it was like always $1,200. So, at the last minute, it's probably gonna be $2,400 to get home in case of emergency. You can't get somewhere quickly and you can't get there in a cost efficient manner, which is why that kind of got marked off my list pretty quickly. But you definitely want to be thinking about what is it like for the people that I was already in community with, and how do I want to stay in community with them? I know for me, the hardest thing has been my nephew. I had pretty much committed to being like super aunt over there. I was seeing him once a month. Both my sister and I live in Texas, so I just take like a bus down and visit for the weekend. And now I can't just hop on a plane every, once a month and visit because it's expensive once again. So that is a dynamic that has changed. But, overall, my life has improved drastically. So I can't say I regret my decision, but there definitely were some sacrifices that I made along the way.
Yeah. And then the other piece too is like when you're working, thinking about the difference in time zones. I have a couple of clients that are in, different parts of Europe. And so, that's a huge time difference. And especially if you're working maybe in a California based company, I mean, that could be, almost a full day's difference, when you're thinking about a work day. And so you have to have meetings, you might have to work into the night, or you might have to work, get up and do things early in the morning. So that could be a big difference if you're working for a US based company. Lauren's mentioned the internet connectivity issues. Maybe even the time zones could be different if you're talking to family members and you're in a different time zone, and maintaining those relationships on the phone or just through FaceTime, things like that.
Ooh, this is good too, because like another place that's popular is Bali. And I loved it. Like I enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed the quality of the food there. I didn't enjoy how scammy people were, but yeah, that's for another episode. But it's a place that's very trendy for people to visit. And I think there are a lot of digital nomads from like Nordic countries. So like Sweden, Norway, etc. And there are some Americans, but it's literally like a 12 or 15 hour difference or something like that. And so it's like you're up all night because that's when it's daytime in the US if you're working remotely and have, responsibilities. And then it's like, so do I sleep all day? Like, how do you enjoy yourself living in Bali, the beautiful weather, etc., if you got to sleep all day because you got to be up all night to be able to make the money? That's a huge piece of the puzzle as it relates to these time zones. So think it through before you do what's just glamorous, like, oh, I'm a digital nomad in Bali. And then you said your work life balance is not good, your psychology is not good, your sleep life is not good because you didn't really think it through in terms of like what your responsibilities were and how that was going to affect your ability to be out and have a life.
So to wrap it up, there are a lot of qualified professionals that you can talk to. So we'll talk about a few of those people here and how they can help you if you are considering this, because we brought up a lot of good topics to think about. So the first is a financial planner for sure. There are financial planners who are experienced in cross-border planning, but just even with that, there's expertise in different countries. So just think about the country that you're looking to live in. And if you want to work with a financial planner that has that cross-border experience, do they know the specific rules and laws and tax structure for the country that you plan to live in? And then how do you need to coordinate with your US assets?
Absolutely. And she said financial planner, y'all, but I'm going to say certified financial planner. All financial planners are not created alike. All financial professionals are not created alike. And like you said, to that point, there are tax advisors, there are attorneys, there are immigration professionals. So like I was talking to you guys about my visa. When I went to do my visa, you can do the process on your own, but you also need to be able to understand like a Colombian government website in Spanish because they're not writing it for you in English, regardless of the fact that it's an immigration and they realize people are coming from another country. And if you mess it up, you can get stuck in processing, it can get denied. So you just hire a lawyer to get it going. And so like I had an immigration lawyer do my paperwork. This next set of paperwork I've already made a plan for, like made my flights based around our plan, etc. But yeah, there's a bunch of different people that you need to be thinking about as you go through that process.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's hopefully that gives you some tips. We'll include some links in the show notes about considerations when moving abroad, some of the stories that we talked about in Trends, Taxes, and Tea, and just some other helpful resources that can set you up for success.
All right. And so we always wrap it up with a money quote. And I'm kind of betwixt and between. I'm going to give you guys two quotes and then I'm going to give you my commentary around these quotes. Because one of them I was like, I don't know. But I'm like, it's actually kind of true. So let me not give it to the people because I don't like it. So the first one is, if the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, you can bet the water bill is higher. And so it made me laugh. I was like, yeah, like greener grass does cost more. Like, what are you doing over there? You're fertilizing, you're spending more time, you're investing more in it. And so many people, like I said, are just like, oh my goodness, I can't stand America. I'm so over it. I can't stand to be here anymore. But every country has its, benefits and its drawbacks. And you're going to be navigating a whole new system. And what you don't know can definitely hurt you. And where that water bill can be higher, it can be very expensive to be in another country and navigating it in an ineffective way. So,
all right. And then the second quote is, you are the one that possesses the keys to your being. You carry the passport to your own happiness.
yeah, I like this one because, like, you carry your passport to your own happiness piece of the puzzle. As we think about fleeing the country and having a passport, you might not need to leave. You might just need to adjust your lifestyle in America in order to be happier. You're not stuck living the life that you are currently living, regardless of what is going on. You can change at any moment. You can get out of that toxic job and find a new one. You can get out of that toxic relationship and find yourself a new one. You carry the passport, you write your own story. And so before, while leaving the country is an option, before you leave the country, think about what you can do to adjust your lifestyle and be happier. Maybe it's the people that you're hanging out with. Maybe it's the, Instagram posts that you're looking at or the TikTok videos, a social media break to just like allow yourself to think about what you want versus hearing all the noise of what everybody says you should have. That could really be life-changing in your life. Does anything stand out to you about either of these quotes, Chloe?
You hit the nail on the head with, making sure that you create your own happiness is so important. And sometimes changing your location does not change the internal things that you need to do to make sure that you're living a happy, fulfilled life.
Amen, amen, amen. All right. I don't know if you're going to leave the country or if you're going to stay in America after learning all this information today, but you said we're always here to be a resource to you to make sure you're educated and that you're thinking through things from a financial aspect. We'll definitely put a lot of notes in the resource section, or what are we going to put? Links. There we go. In the notes section. Y'all know what I mean. Look at the bottom of this post when you get done listening if you want resources. Like I said, we're in a series where we're talking about all the different things that are making people feel uncertain in this day and age and in this 2025 and this America that we're currently living in. And so next up, we're going to be talking how to navigate a layoff. And we're also going to be talking about the good financial habits that you need to have and how to make a checklist around those things so that you can navigate the uncertainty of the world a little bit better. Till next time, people.
Bye.